Hello students, welcome to a lesson through the virtual training center of the Brihan Mumbai Mahanagar Palika. My name is Shraddha teacher, and in this lockdown period, since we are not able to go to school children, we will be doing many lessons here online through the virtual class. So come on, let's proceed to our lesson for today. So children, does this image look familiar to you? If yes, it is because we are going to continue the lesson that we were doing last time. So we were doing a lesson in standard 8th. The subject was English and the topic was lesson number 3.3, the last leaf. In the previous part of this lesson, children, in the last video, we looked at certain exercises from the English warming up part, and we also looked at the story in detail. Now in this part of the lesson today, we are going to look at certain grammar exercises, and we will also look at certain exercises which are related to the story in the lesson. So come on, let's go to part 2 of the lesson 3.3, the last leaf. So let us start by revising or doing a quick recap of the story of Sue and Johnsy. Now children, if you want to see the story in detail again, you can always go back and watch the previous video. So Sue and Johnsy were two girls who were struggling artists, and they were living in the poorer parts of New York City. They were sharing the same flat, and they were struggling to make their life as artists. Now one fine day, Johnsy fell very sick. So we saw that they were two young artists, and Johnsy, she felt sick because it was cold also, and somewhere or the other Johnsy was tired of struggling in order to make a life. So if you remember, in the previous video I also told you that most of the artists, or a majority of the artists, even though in spite of being very good at their work, they sometimes do not get the kind of success that they deserve. So they keep struggling all their life. So in this particular story, we also talked and saw about Mr. Berman, who was again a painter, but he could not succeed all his life. Now Johnsy, she had pneumonia, and when she called the doctor told Sue that Johnsy was well and she would get well if she would be in a good frame of mind. That is, if she would be cheerful, if she would have positive thoughts, then she will become well very soon, and only medicines are not going to help her at all. So later in the story, we saw how Johnsy started focusing on an ivy vine, and she started looking at the ivy vine and started feeling that the moment the last leaf fell off the ivy vine, she would also stop living. So to see the story in detail, children, I would again request you to go and watch the previous video which I have put up about this particular lesson. So towards the end, we saw that in spite of all the negative thoughts, in spite of all the worries of not getting well, okay, Johnsy survived, and that was because of the kindness of the old painter called Mr. Berman. But we saw that unfortunately towards the end, Mr. Berman had to give up his life while painting his last masterpiece. So that was the story which we saw in the previous video, children. Let us move on now and let us see certain exercises which are related to the story. Now if you have read the story well, you will definitely be able to write or find answers to these words or to these questions. So these are certain fill in the blanks where you're supposed to find out which the right answer is. So struggling artists, they fight with one another, they try hard to earn a living, or they paint war scenes. So yes, which is the right one? It is the second one. Struggling artists try hard to earn a living. See the next one. Skeletal branches means what? Does it means bones branching out from joints? That is, we have many joints in our body. So, are they the bones which are coming out from the joints? Are they leafy branches or are they bare branches? Bare means branches which are empty. So, skeletal branches are bare branches. Okay? Wielded the brush means what? Means painted skillfully, or wielded the brush means broke the brush, or wielded the brush means joined a broken brush. So someone is wielding the brush means he is painting skillfully, painting beautifully. Okay? Look at the next one. What is the meaning of a palette? Is it the tip of the brush? Is it a board used by artists to mix colors? Or is it a fancy dinner plate? So if you read the story, you will definitely know that a palette is a board which is used by artists to mix colors. Alright? And what is a masterpiece? Is it a master who promotes peace? It is the very first creation of an artist, or is it an exceptionally beautiful work of art? So a masterpiece is an exceptionally beautiful work of art. So children, in a way, this was an exercise based on vocabulary. So in the same lesson, we have exercises based on vocabulary, that is homophones and homographs. So there is one more exercise which is based on vocabulary. Now let us talk about the facts of the story. So who are the main characters in the story? They are Johnsy, Sue and Berman. So Johnsy and Sue are painters, young painters who aspire to become good painters, successful painters. And Berman is an old painter who has not been able to see success all his life. What is the problem in the story? So Johnsy was very sick and she doesn't have any hopes of living. She has given up on all hopes of living. What are the attempts which are made to solve Johnsy's problem? So her very good friend Sue, she tries to solve this problem. She tries to cheer Johnsy up and she also looks after her very well. She feeds her on time, she gets a doctor to see her, and she also gives her her medicines on time. So Sue, her friend, tries to solve Johnsy's problem. What about the climax? Or what about the turning point in the story? The turning point is where Johnsy takes inspiration from the leaf which did not fall. So throughout the story, we can see that Johnsy is in a negative frame of mind and she is wanting to die, and she continuously looks at the ivy plant and she's counting the leaves, and she's doing a reverse count of the leaves, and she says that when the last leaf ceases to exist on that vine, that will be the day when I will also cease to exist. But then we see what all happened in the story. We saw what all things happen in the story, the turn of events, and how Sue went and sought help from Mr. Berman, and the efforts which were taken by Berman in order to make Johnsy change her mind, or in order to inspire Johnsy, or to give her a will to continue living. How did the problem get solved? The problem got solved when Johnsy's health started recovering. So what was the problem? The problem was that Johnsy was sick. Now Johnsy started recovering, she started getting healthier, so that means the problem was solved. What happened in the end? In the end, Mr. Berman died in a hospital. Why did Mr. Berman die? It was his efforts in order to make Johnsy want to live, which led to his own death. He stood out in the rain the whole night, painting the leaf which had already fallen off. Okay, and he was old, and that made him sick, and he developed pneumonia, and he passed away, or he died in a hospital 2 days later. So these are all the facts about the story. So once you read these facts, you will be able to understand what the story is about, or in other words, if you know the story, you will be able to write about these facts which are in the story. Moving on, let us look at these statements and let us decide that based on the story that we have seen now, are these statements true or are they false? So Sue and John C. were very close friends. Yes, this is a right statement. They were indeed very close friends. Sue was a rich girl. No, Sue was not a rich girl. She was a poor, struggling artist. John C. was hopeful that she will live. So what is the fact? No, it is wrong, because John C. did not have any hopes of living. She was thinking about all the negative things that might happen to her. Was Berman a hard-hearted person? Not at all. Berman was a very kind man who in a way gave up his life to save the life of this young artist. The last leaf fell off during the rain. So did the last leaf fall off? Yes, it did. So the statement is right. John C. realized that the thinking was wrong. Yes, she did that think towards the end, that it is a sin to want to die. So John C. was right. Berman did not know anything about the last leaf on the ivy. The statement is wrong, because Berman himself had painted the last leaf on the ivy. Okay, so these are all statements related to the story. So if you know how to say whether they are true or they are false, that means you know the story very well. Let us move on, and now let us go to the grammar exercise that we have in the story. And that grammar is about clause. So children, what is a clause we will see now, and then we will look at the definition and the meaning and the examples of clause which are given in your textbook also. We will look at certain extra examples, and then we will try and solve the exercise based on clause in your textbook. So let us start by understanding what a clause is. So a clause is a part of the sentence that contains a verb. So we all know that in every sentence we have a subject and a predicate, and a verb is also an important part of any sentence. So every sentence has to have a verb if it is a sentence. So the part of the sentence where there is a verb is called as the clause. A typical clause consists of a subject and a predicate. So the predicate is usually a verb or a verb phrase. Look at the examples. He must stop laughing. Okay, so he is the subject, must stop laughing is the predicate, and then the verb here is stop. They have done the job. Tom likes the meat. We like the music that you brought. Alright, so these are all examples of parts of sentences where the verb is present. These part of sentences could be a part of a bigger sentence. Alright, so clause is nothing but a group of words which is a part of a sentence where there is the verb also present. Moving on, let us talk about the types of clauses. So we can have two kinds of clauses in any sentence. There could be the independent clause and the dependent clause. So we have learned about clauses previously also. So children, what is an independent clause? An independent clause can stand alone as it expresses a complete thought. Whereas a dependent clause, dependent itself says and means that it is dependent on someone else. It cannot stand alone. In the same way, a dependent clause cannot stand alone and it has to depend on some other clause. So in the sentence, an independent clause is there with complete meaning, and a dependent clause is used in order to express the meaning along with the independent clause. Okay? You also call them as the main clause and the subordinate clause. So the independent clause is often called as the main clause and the dependent clause is called as the subordinate clause, in other words. So this is the meaning of the two types of clauses. Now there are certain words which join these two clauses together. They are called as the subordinators, or they are also called as the subordinating conjunctions. So you can either call them as the subordinators or the subordinating conjunctions. So these are the linking words that join these two clauses together. These subordinators, they can be used in the beginning or in the middle of a sentence. So we are going to talk about three things which are the part of the exercise that we have to solve today. We are going to talk about the independent clause or the main clause, dependent clause or the subordinate clause, and the subordinators. All right. So these are the definitions given in your textbook along with the examples. So if you have your textbook open, you can refer to this part of the textbook. So a clause is a group of words that has a subject and a verb and is a part of a larger sentence. This is the exact definition of the clause given in your English textbook. Then they have also said in this particular example, they've given you an example sentence where they say that in the sentence, we returned home when school was over. So look at the sentence carefully. We returned home when school was over. There are two clauses. Which are they? We returned home and when school was over. So look at both of them carefully. The first is we returned home. The second is when school was over. Now we will try and judge and we will try and ascertain which one of these could be the main clause and which could be the subordinate clause. So see, when we say we returned home, think of it as an independent sentence and try to figure out whether it has got complete meaning. Yes, it has. This one makes a complete sense. So it is called as the main clause or the principal clause. So we returned home is the main clause or the principal clause or the independent clause. Look at the next part of the sentence. When school was over. So when you say when school was over, so the other person will ask you, yes, what about it? Try to complete what you're saying. When school was over means what? That means this part of the sentence is not giving you complete meaning. That is why we will call it as the dependent or the subordinate clause. Why? Because it has to depend on the main clause to convey proper sense. Otherwise it is kind of senseless. You can take it in whichever way you want to. When school was over, I went home. When school was over, I ate my tiffin. When school was over, I went out and played. So see, the meaning is not clear. Alright, so these are examples of the main clause and the dependent clause as given in your textbook. And here you will see the word when. See, it is underlined. That is the joining word, or that is the subordinator. We also call it as the subordinating conjunction. Let us look at certain examples now here. Before that, once again, an independent clause, they are complete because they make sense on their own. A subordinate clause, it begins with a subordinate conjunction. Okay, see here. Asif, let us read it as one sentence first and then break it up into two. Asif plays hockey as he enjoys it. So Asif plays hockey has got complete meaning. When we say as he enjoys it, you realize that it doesn't have a complete meaning, so it is a dependent clause. And then what is the word that is connecting these two parts of the sentence together? It is as. So that is the subordinator. Shazia could not catch the bus because she was late. So here because is joining the main clause or the independent clause. Shazia could not catch the bus with the dependent clause, she was late. So Shazia could not catch the bus because she was late. Ali could not finish the mathematics test although he knew all the sums. Although here is the coordinating conjunction or the coordinator. Arifa quickly ate her lunch as she was very hungry. Harris is back from work, so he must take rest. You must work hard if you want to succeed in life. Alright, children. So these are examples of how a sentence can be broken up into an independent clause and a dependent clause, and also how we can identify the coordinating conjunction or the coordinator. Now let us go to this example from the textbook, or this exercise from the textbook. Now in these sentences you are supposed to point out which is the main clause, which is the subordinate clause, and you are supposed to encircle the subordinator. That is, you are supposed to draw a circle around the subordinator. Now read all the sentences, rewind the video and try and find out what is the meaning of the main clause, subordinate clause, which I have given you, I have taught you just now. Try and look at the various examples and then come back and try to solve these questions. So do not directly go to the answers which I will be showing you. Okay, so make this a practice, children. Whenever there is an exercise and whenever there are questions asked, always pause the video and try to find out the answers yourself. For this, it is very, very important that you always have your English textbook at hand whenever you're learning a new lesson in English. So whenever you start watching a video, you know what the name of the lesson is. So immediately pick up your English textbooks and come to that particular lesson. So let us proceed now on the promise that you will pause the video and you will not see the answers directly. You will try to find out the answers yourself first. Let us go to sentence number 1 or sentence A. There was a colony where many struggling artists lived. Try to see which is the main clause here, which is the subordinate clause, and also we will try and encircle the subordinator. So there was a colony is the main clause. Where many struggling artists lived is the subordinate clause. And let us draw a circle around the subordinator, which is where. Okay. B, example B. Though Sue looked after her well, John-C showed no signs of improvement. So John-C showed no signs of improvement is the main clause, and like we discussed, sometimes the subordinator could be in the middle of the sentence and sometimes it could be in the beginning. So here we have the subordinate clause, though Sue looked after her well. And the subordinator is though. We come to the next sentence, sentence C. Sue thought that she had fallen asleep. So Sue thought is the main clause. That she had fallen asleep is the subordinate clause, and that is the subordinator. Old Berman was a painter who lived on the ground floor. Old Berman was a painter is the main clause. Who lived on the ground floor is the subordinate clause, and who is the subordinator. Johnny was sleeping when the two went upstairs. Johnny was sleeping is the main clause. When the two went upstairs is the subordinate clause, and when is the subordinator. I want to see the last one before it falls. I want to see the last one is the main clause. Before it falls is the subordinate clause, and before is the subordinator. So children, this was the exercise based on main clause, subordinate clause and subordinator, and this is the last exercise from the story that we have in our textbook. Let me also now remind you that this is the second part of the lesson that we are doing today in this video. We have done video number 1 previously, where we saw the story and certain exercises from the warming up part, and in the second part of the video now we have revised the story and we have looked at certain exercises based on the story, and finally we have done this grammar point about clauses. So that is all for today children from this particular lesson, lesson number 3.3, the last leaf. So children, wasn't that a wonderful video, and did you enjoy watching it? So if you want to watch more such videos in future, then please like this video and also subscribe to our channel, the MCGM Portal for Education, and also hit the bell button so that you get notified whenever I upload a new video here. Thank you so much for now. Let's meet again soon.